Lieutenant Kale's boots clicked against the polished floor of the Thalorian palace as he walked through corridors wider than any human hall he had ever seen. The walls shimmered with a soft, iridescent glow, like light caught in liquid metal, and towering pillars carved with strange alien symbols stretched upward, disappearing into shadows above. Every step echoed, not just in the corridor, but in Kale's mind. He had walked into countless dangerous situations before, but this was different. He was a human, sent alone into the heart of an alien empire, and the outcome of countless lives rested on what he was about to do. He paused for a moment, adjusting the strap of his tactical harness. Around his neck hung a small badge, the emblem of humanity, a simple blue circle with a white star. To the aliens, it might have looked like nothing, but to him, it was a symbol of everything he had fought for. Every colony lost, every battle survived, every human life at stake. It was all tied to this moment. The palace was unlike any battlefield Kale had known. Outside, fleets clashed in the void of space, distant explosions rocking the human colonies orbiting nearby planets. He could see the glow of lasers piercing the darkness, the trails of missiles arcing toward enemy ships. Humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the brink of annihilation. Yet here he was, standing inside the palace of Queen Elara, the ruler of the Thalorian Empire, whose forces could destroy his homeworld in less than a single cycle of their twin suns. Kale took a deep breath. Humans had survived not because they were the strongest, but because they understood things others didn't. Intuition, emotion, and above all, courage. He had trained his whole life to adapt, to find openings where others saw none, to speak truths that could change minds when weapons could not. That was his mission now, not to fight, but to persuade, to plant a seed in the mind of a queen who had never faced anything like a human soldier before. The door at the end of the corridor loomed, massive and carved from a single slab of dark crystal. Two Thalorian guards stood motionless, their forearms folded across their chests, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Their faces were smooth and unchanging like stone, but Kale could feel their scrutiny like a pressure in the air. One misstep, one wrong word, and he would not walk out alive. "State your business," one guard said in a voice that resonated like a deep bell. Kale had learned a few Thalorian phrases, enough to sound respectful. "I bring intelligence and a proposal," Kale replied in clear, calm English, knowing the Queen's aides would translate. "It is urgent and concerns the future of both our peoples." Kale entered, and the temperature of the room seemed to shift, as if the air itself were aware of his presence. The chamber was breathtaking. It was circular, with a ceiling that arched high above, dotted with luminous orbs that hovered and pulsed with light. At the center, a massive table floated above the floor, supported by beams of energy rather than legs. Around it sat dozens of alien council members, each species more alien than the last, some with crystalline skin, others with multiple heads or shifting forms. All of them watched Kale with an intensity that made his skin prickle. At the head of the table sat Queen Elara. Even from a distance, her presence was undeniable. She was taller than most Thalorians, her skin a deep violet that shimmered under the chamber lights. Her eyes were large and luminous, golden flecks spinning like tiny stars within them. Her posture was regal, yet she seemed relaxed, almost curious as she studied him. Kale realized something immediately: this queen was not like the others. She did not see him merely as a human, an enemy. She was observing him as if trying to understand, as if the very act of observation mattered. Kale swallowed, remembering why he was here. Words alone would not save his people. He needed to reach her mind, her sense of reason, her empathy, whatever fragment of morality existed in a ruler who had been raised in war. He stepped forward, feeling the council's silent judgment weigh on him. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture could be read as a sign of weakness or deception. He stopped a few feet from the queen, bowing slightly in respect, not in submission, but in recognition of the gravity of this moment. "Your Majesty," Kale began, his voice steady. "I am Lieutenant Kale of the Terran Defense Forces. I have come to share something that may change the course of this war, if you are willing to listen." One of them hissed a question through the translator device, something Kale didn't need to understand fully. It was a test, a probe to see if he would flinch. He did not. Kale's mind raced. How could he condense centuries of human experience, years of training, and the survival of billions into a single, whispered truth? He knew the Council expected numbers, strategies, perhaps even threats. But humans often prevailed through something far subtler: understanding, connection, morality. He stepped closer to the Queen, close enough that the Council's eyes widened. No one had ever approached Elara without her invitation. Kale lowered his voice to a whisper, so soft that even the nearest council member could not hear. "War destroys more than armies," he said, letting each word land deliberately. "It destroys hope, it destroys trust, it destroys the future. We can fight, yes, but the cost will be endless, and the galaxy will remember the loss forever. I ask you, choose peace. Not for us, not for your enemies, but for the children who will inherit this universe." For the first time, Kale saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. He held his breath, feeling the weight of centuries of alien expectation pressing down on both of them. The council erupted. Shouts and clicks and harsh sounds filled the chamber. "Traitor!" one shouted. "Weakness!" another hissed, their voices combined into a roar of disbelief. They could not comprehend what was happening. The human was not pleading, not fighting, not scheming. He was appealing to something they had long dismissed, conscience. Elara raised a hand and the room fell silent. Every council member froze as if a physical force held them still. Her gaze did not leave Kale. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned back in her chair, considering the whisper. He saw her mind working, calculating, remembering, weighing the lives at stake against the centuries of inherited hatred. Kale dared not move. Every second stretched like an eternity. Outside, he could imagine the fleets waiting, the colonies trembling under alien fire. But here, in this room, time seemed to stand still. This was not a battle of weapons, but a battle of ideas, of values, of the potential for change. The queen spoke, her voice low, measured, commanding. "You have given me something I have never been offered," she said. Her words, translated instantly by the devices around the room, reverberated through the council. "I must think. I must choose wisely." Kale remained silent, waiting. He did not need to defend himself. He had done his part. Now the queen must decide. Finally, she leaned forward, her gaze sweeping the room. "I will not give you an answer today," she said. "But know this, your words have changed me. You may leave, human, and live to see if the seeds of peace take root." He had survived. He had done more than survive. He had reached a mind that might, just might, choose the path of reason over destruction. As he turned to leave, the council's whispers followed him, sharp and angry, but he did not look back. Outside the chamber, the corridors seemed somehow different, less intimidating, less alien. For the first time, Kale felt the stirrings of something larger than himself. Humanity was small, fragile, and underestimated, but it was capable of planting ideas that could echo across stars. He stepped into the hall, the light reflecting off the crystal walls, and allowed himself a small, private smile. One human soldier had whispered a truth into the ear of a queen, and for now that whisper was enough to hold back the storm. Outside, the war still raged. Lasers streaked across space, explosions lit the void, and millions of lives hung in the balance. But Kale had done what humans did best: survive, adapt, and make a difference when all odds seemed impossible. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Queen of Thaler would carry a human whisper in her mind, a fragile spark of hope that might just change the fate of worlds. Kale returned to the corridor outside the Queen's chamber, but he could still feel her gaze lingering on him, as if she were weighing his words even now. He did not turn back. The palace's polished floors stretched endlessly before him, reflecting the shimmering light of the hovering orbs above. Every step was measured, careful, but the weight on his shoulders had not eased. He had survived the impossible task of entering the Queen's chamber, whispering a message that could either save or doom countless lives. But he knew this was only the beginning. He moved quickly, following the twisting corridors that led him to the transport docks. Outside the palace, human observers waited in orbit, their ship small against the massive Thalorian fleet. Kale's mind raced as he walked. The whisper had been heard, the seed planted, but he could already feel the ripple of tension spreading through the alien council. Some members would never forgive him, others might see his words as a challenge to their authority. The war had not ended, it had only shifted to a battlefield of ideas. In the quiet of the transport bay, Kale allowed himself a moment to breathe. He had delivered his message directly to the Queen, bypassing the translators, the council, and the endless bureaucratic filters. In doing so, he had broken every convention, every rule the Thalorians had set for dealing with humans, and yet he felt no regret. Humans survived not because they followed rules. They survived because they understood when rules could be bent, broken, or rewritten entirely. The transport hummed as it lifted off, carrying him back toward the edge of the fleet. Kale looked out the viewport at the vast expanse of space, dotted with alien ships of every shape and size. Lasers streaked through the darkness, missiles exploded in bursts of orange and blue, and human colonies shimmered like tiny jewels under fire. The war continued, relentless, but for the first time, Kale felt a glimmer of possibility. Perhaps the whisper had reached further than he could know. Meanwhile, back in the council chamber, the Thalorian council erupted into chaos. Council members clicked, hissed, and shifted in agitation. They could not understand what had just happened. A human had come unarmed into their queen's chamber and spoken a truth so simple yet so profound that it unsettled centuries of tradition and inherited enmity. Some whispered of treachery. Some called it weakness, but all of them sensed a change, subtle and unsettling. Queen Elara remained seated, her golden eyes fixed on the distant star maps displayed in the chamber. For the first time, she allowed herself to think beyond conquest. She thought of the countless lives that would be lost if she allowed the fleet to strike human colonies unchecked. She thought of her own people who had grown accustomed to endless war and wondered what purpose such victories truly served. Kale's words had awakened something within her, a recognition that strategy alone was not enough. Morality, understanding, and empathy were weapons far stronger than any fleet of ships. Elara's second-in-command, a crystalline being named Vorin, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, voice sharp and resonant, "the human is dangerous. He has already disrupted the council. We cannot allow his words to influence our decisions. We must strike before weakness spreads. He is dangerous because he has shown me a perspective I have never considered. How many civilizations will be lost because we cannot see beyond ourselves?" Her voice was steady, yet there was a weight to it that silenced the room. The council members shifted uneasily, sensing that she was no longer the queen they had known, the ruler who accepted inherited hatred without question. Meanwhile, Kale's shuttle approached the edge of the Thalorian fleet. He had no weapons on board, no backup plan, and yet he felt a strange sense of confidence. Humans thrived in impossible situations because they could adapt. Every step he had taken had been calculated, but he knew that the most important part of this mission, the part that could change everything, was already underway. The queen was thinking. The seed had been planted. Back in the council chamber, whispers grew louder. Some council members began to question their assumptions about humans. They had always seen them as weak, insignificant, and easy to destroy. And yet, here was a single human who had infiltrated the palace, spoken directly to the queen, and survived. His courage and intelligence had left a mark that could not be ignored. Elara rose from her seat, her presence commanding immediate silence. "We have followed this war for generations," she began, her voice steady. "We have measured power in fleets, weapons, and victories, and yet we have forgotten something crucial: understanding. Without it, every conquest is meaningless, every victory hollow. The human has reminded me that the true measure of strength is not in destruction, but in the choices we make when faced with destruction." Elara's eyes, fixed on the star maps of human colonies, reflected something new: curiosity, hesitation, and the beginnings of empathy. Meanwhile, Kale's shuttle docked at the observation deck of the human fleet. The commanding officer, Admiral Reyes, approached, eyes wide with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "Lieutenant Kale," he said, voice tense, "you went straight into the palace. Alone. And you came back alive. What did you do?" "One human whispering to a queen and the war might stop. That's impossible. I did what I had to do, and now we wait." She had felt the weight of Kale's words, not as a threat, but as a challenge to think differently. Some council members could not accept it. They whispered of rebellion, of insubordination, of the need to remove the queen from power if she continued to hesitate. Others, however, began to see the merit in her hesitation. They had followed her commands for years, yet never before had they questioned whether conquest alone was meaningful. The human had forced them to consider another perspective, a perspective that acknowledged life, possibility, and reason. Elara raised her hands, calming the murmurs. "We will not act impulsively," she said. "We will consider the consequences of every action. We will not allow fear or tradition to dictate our decisions." Her words carried the weight of authority, and yet they were different from any commands she had given before. There was a deliberateness to them, a recognition that choices mattered beyond the battlefield. Kale watched from the fleet as signals from the Queen's palace indicated no immediate attack. He felt a cautious hope stir within him. This was not victory, not yet. The war was not over. But the human had made a difference. A single act of courage, a simple whisper, had introduced the possibility of change into a galaxy that had long believed change impossible. As the stars stretched endlessly before him, Kale reflected on what humans had always understood. Survival was not only about strength or numbers. It was about perception, understanding, and the courage to act when all seemed lost. He had done what no fleet or weapon could do. He had reached the mind of a queen. And now the consequences of that reach would unfold, shaping the fate of worlds in ways he could only begin to imagine. Inside the Thalorian palace, Elara remained seated long after Kale had left. Her eyes were fixed on the human star systems below. She thought of the lives that depended on her next decisions, and of the soldier whose courage had forced her to question everything she had been taught. The council members, restless and uncertain, waited for her command. But for the first time in her life, the Queen of Thalar realized that power alone was not enough. Insight, compassion, and understanding could be far more dangerous and far more transformative than any weapon. And so the galaxy held its breath. The war continued, yet for the first time there was a pause, a possibility. One human soldier, whispering a simple truth to a queen, had introduced an idea so radical that it could change the fate of billions. That idea, fragile as it was, carried the seed of hope, the possibility that even in a universe dominated by war, understanding could prevail. Kale did not know if the queen would act, nor if his words would be enough to sway her completely. But he had learned something that all humans understood deep in their bones. One act, one choice, one whisper could change everything. And in that quiet, momentary pause in the chaos of war, the galaxy felt the faint stirrings of something extraordinary, the beginning of hope. Queen Elara sat in silence long after the council had dispersed for the day. The chamber, once filled with the murmur of alien voices and the clicking debates of the council, now felt empty and still. She stared out at the vast star systems below, watching the human colonies twinkle like tiny jewels of life in the darkness. Kale's whisper replayed in her mind over and over, each word like a pulse of heat in her chest. War destroys more than armies. It destroys hope, it destroys trust, it destroys the future. Every lesson she had learned, every council debate she had observed, reinforced the idea that humans were insignificant, expendable even. And yet, Kale had unsettled her in a way no warrior, no diplomat, and no council member ever had. For the first time, Elara considered what it meant to lead not just with power, but with wisdom. She thought of the countless worlds her fleets had destroyed, the lives that had ended in fire and smoke because of decisions made without thought, without hesitation, without understanding. She remembered the faces of her people, their hope and fear tied to her choices, and realized that leadership was not only about victory. It was about the consequences of that victory, the lasting impact on those who survived and those who did not. The council would resist. Some of her advisors would argue that hesitation was weakness, that mercy was a dangerous illusion. Others might see the wisdom in pause, the value in rethinking centuries of conflict. But the queen knew that the future would not wait for the council to agree. If she acted too slowly, entire human colonies could be obliterated before reason even had a chance to take hold. And Kale, the human soldier, had given her the courage to act differently. Elara rose from her throne and began pacing the chamber. Her golden eyes scanned the star maps again. She noted the locations of human colonies, the paths of Thalorian strike fleets, and the positions of allied species ready to join in the assault. Every calculation showed the same truth. War would be swift, decisive, and brutal. But now, for the first time, she weighed an alternative. Perhaps strength could be shown not only through destruction, but through restraint, through negotiation, through understanding. A faint buzz in her communicator broke her reverie. It was Vorin, her crystalline second-in-command, who had already begun rallying other council members. "Your Majesty," Vorin said, voice sharp, "the council is restless. Some members are questioning your hesitation. They say you have allowed a human to manipulate your judgment. They demand we move forward with the attack. One that may save countless lives, not just of humans, but of our own people as well. Strength without foresight is arrogance. If we destroy every human colony, what will be left for us to govern? A galaxy of ashes. I will not allow our legacy to be written in fire alone. They may try to remove you or bypass your orders entirely. The council will wait, whether they like it or not." His words had reminded her that war was not inevitable, that lives were not numbers on a map, and that empathy could be a tool as powerful as any weapon. Meanwhile, in the human fleet, Kale had returned to his duties but could not shake the feeling that the Queen was already acting on his words. Reports had come in from distant colonies. The initial bombardments had slowed, Thalorian strike fleets were hesitating, and transmissions intercepted from their ships showed confusion among their commanders. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to give hope. Kale moved through the observation deck, looking at the rows of ships and the human pilots preparing for battle. He could feel their tension, the fear in their eyes, and he knew that hope alone would not protect them. Humans had survived countless wars, countless invasions, because they relied on strategy, ingenuity, and adaptability. He had planted a seed with the Queen, but it would take time, careful moves, and calculated risks to see if that seed would grow into something that could truly stop the war. Back on Thaler, Ilara called a private meeting with a few trusted advisors. Among them were scholars, tacticians, and a small faction of council members who had shown openness to alternative perspectives. She spoke with quiet authority, laying out her reasoning and sharing her observations of human behavior. "They are not the simple, weak species we have assumed," she said. "They survive not by sheer force, but by intellect, by understanding, by resilience. One human soldier has entered this palace unarmed, whispered to me, and left without harm. That is not weakness, it is strategy. That is courage, and it forces us to reconsider our assumptions about the galaxy." One elder, a wise figure with translucent skin and facets like ice, spoke slowly. "Your Majesty, what you suggest is unconventional, perhaps dangerous, but it is also thoughtful. We have not considered that restraint could be a form of strength. Perhaps you are right. If we destroy the humans, we destroy not only them, but the opportunity for cooperation, for understanding, for growth. And in the end, growth is the measure of civilization, not conquest." She knew there would be resistance, that some members of the council would oppose her, perhaps even try to undermine her. But she had already decided. She would act, and she would act with conviction. Meanwhile, Kale received an encrypted message from the Queen herself, a rare personal transmission. He opened it cautiously, expecting protocol, threats, or demands. Instead, it was a single line. "Your words matter. Continue your efforts. Humanity may yet surprise us all." In the days that followed, subtle changes began to emerge. Thalorian fleets that had been on attack trajectories altered their courses slightly, holding back strikes and reassessing targets. Communications between the Queen and her advisors became more deliberate, more cautious. Humans on the front lines noticed the hesitation, though they did not yet understand why. Kale observed all of it, piecing together the effects of his actions and the Queen's reactions. The war was far from over, but for the first time in decades, there was a pause, a window of opportunity. Kale knew it would not last forever. The council would resist, some commanders would act on instinct, and the chaos of war could undo any progress in an instant. But he also knew that humans thrived in such moments, using ingenuity, courage, and careful strategy to survive and adapt. And then came the moment that confirmed everything. The Queen convened a council session in which she publicly questioned the need for immediate attacks on human colonies. She presented alternative strategies, emphasizing restraint, reconnaissance, and negotiation. The council erupted in debate, but her authority and reasoning could not be ignored. For the first time, a clear pause in the war emerged, a deliberate reconsideration of the course of action. Kale watched from his fleet, understanding the significance. One human soldier, by speaking truth to a queen, had forced the mightiest empire he had ever faced to question its own assumptions. It was not victory, not yet, but it was change. And in a galaxy ruled by fear, power, and conquest, change was a dangerous, remarkable, and profoundly human thing. Ilara, meanwhile, reflected on the weeks that had passed since Kale's whisper. She had begun to see humans not as enemies, but as a species capable of remarkable resilience, insight, and courage. She thought of the soldier himself, standing alone, unarmed, and yet fearless, speaking truths that had the power to alter the fate of worlds. That was a lesson she could not ignore, no matter the cost. In her private chambers, she wrote notes, sent orders to her fleet to hold back, and prepared for the inevitable backlash from her council. She knew that some would resist, that some would act against her, and that some might even attempt to seize power. But she also knew that she had witnessed something extraordinary. One human, armed with nothing but words and courage, had shown her a path she had never imagined. And so the galaxy held its breath. Battles raged in the distance, fleets maneuvered across the void, and lives hung in the balance. But in the quiet spaces between stars, a small but significant change had taken root. The whisper of a human soldier had begun to alter the thinking of a queen, and with it, the course of a war that had seemed inevitable for centuries. For Kale and for humanity, it was a moment of hope. A moment that proved, once again, that courage, intelligence, and empathy could survive even in the harshest, most dangerous corners of the universe. And as he prepared for the next steps, he knew that the challenge ahead would be greater than anything he had faced. But so too would the opportunity for humanity to prove itself in ways the galaxy had never imagined. The council chamber was tense like never before. The air shimmered with the energy of countless debates, but this time it was different. The Thalorian Council had expected a soldier to be silenced, a human to be dismissed, or at worst, executed. Instead, the human had survived and influenced the Queen's thoughts, shaking centuries of tradition. Queen Elara's golden eyes glowed steadily as she rose from her throne, her posture calm yet commanding, holding the weight of authority with grace. "Council," she said, her voice steady and unwavering, "we have always measured strength by fleets and weapons, but today I ask you to consider another measure, understanding." Her words rippled through the chamber, making even the most stubborn council members pause. Vorin, her crystalline second-in-command, stepped forward, facets flickering with tension. "Your Majesty, understanding is a dangerous tool. The humans have long been unpredictable. You risk hesitation while fleets are ready to strike. Delay can mean defeat. What legacy do we leave if we destroy without thought?" Kale watched from the human fleet through the live link he had managed to maintain. The screen showed the Queen, standing confidently, addressing an alien council that had never faced a moral challenge of this kind. His heart pounded. He had planted a seed, but he had not known how deeply it would take root. Elara raised a hand to silence the murmurs. "Humans are not simply weak or insignificant," she continued. "They survive because they adapt, because they think, because they act with courage even when the odds are against them. One human soldier entered this palace unarmed and unprotected and spoke truths that I could not ignore. Do you understand? Strength is not always measured in fleets or firepower. It is also measured in the courage to choose wisely." Kale knew the council's reaction mattered. If they resisted too strongly, the Queen could be forced to act alone, or worse, her hesitation could be overridden by war-hungry generals. He sent a coded message to her personal device. "Emphasize strategy, not just morality. Show them that cooperation benefits Thaler as much as humanity. Strength with wisdom beats brute force. Our fleets will be exhausted, our people embittered, and our legacy stained by unnecessary bloodshed. Or we can seek a path that preserves life, strengthens our alliances, and demonstrates that power guided by wisdom is far greater than power used for destruction alone." A few looked shocked, as if such reasoning had never been considered in a Thalorian council chamber. Others clicked with agitation. War had been their identity for generations. To think that diplomacy, understanding, and restraint could be a measure of true strength was revolutionary. Vorin's voice rose, sharp and accusing. "Your Majesty, do you allow a human soldier to dictate your decisions? This is unprecedented. If you hesitate now, the council may be forced to act without you. It requires wisdom, foresight, and understanding." Elara let them argue, allowing each voice to be heard, knowing that reason had a way of winning over time. Kale watched the chamber through the fleet's observation link, his pulse quickening. This was the turning point. The council's decision now would determine whether his whisper would echo through history or be drowned in the tide of war. He clenched his fists and focused on the human colonies at risk. Every second mattered. Then Elara raised her voice again, cutting through the chatter. "Enough," she commanded. The chamber fell silent. Her gaze swept across the council. "We will not strike blindly. Instead, we will assess, we will negotiate, and we will act only when all alternatives have been considered. We will ensure that our actions preserve life, where possible, while maintaining the security of our empire." Kale exhaled slowly, relief and cautious optimism mingling in his chest. The Queen had not only heard him, but she had acted, subtly and decisively, to change the course of the council's decision. The fleets were being held in check, and the colonies had a chance they might never have had without a human soldier stepping boldly into the heart of an alien empire. In the following days, Elara worked tirelessly to implement her vision. She met with advisors, scholars, and a few council members willing to consider alternative strategies. Together, they developed plans for reconnaissance, negotiation, and limited strikes designed to minimize unnecessary destruction while preserving Thaler's authority. The Queen's decisions were deliberate, calculated, and most importantly, guided by understanding rather than fear or tradition. Kale, meanwhile, continued coordinating with human commanders, monitoring Thalorian movements and preparing defenses. He knew the Council's opposition had not disappeared. Some fleet commanders were already trying to push forward with aggressive maneuvers despite the Queen's orders. But for the first time, he saw cracks in their resolve. Hesitation was spreading, and hesitation in a war-fueled empire could lead to opportunity. Ilara summoned Kale personally via a secure link, her voice calm but full of intensity. "Lieutenant Kale, your words were more powerful than you realize. You have made me reconsider not only my strategy but the nature of our empire. Humans possess a kind of strength that cannot be measured in weapons or fleets. You have reminded me that courage, intelligence, and understanding can shape history as effectively as any strike. But if you allow cooperation rather than destruction, there is a chance for peace, a chance for growth that benefits both our species. Your perspective is invaluable in navigating not only their minds, but also the uncertainties of war." But time and again, their ingenuity, courage, and empathy had allowed them to survive, and now perhaps to thrive in ways that no one had imagined. As days turned into weeks, small victories began to accumulate. Fleet commanders delayed strikes, human colonies were given time to reinforce defenses, and diplomatic channels slowly opened. The Council remained divided, but Ilara's authority held. She was a queen changed by a whisper, willing to challenge centuries of tradition for the sake of reason and morality. In private moments, Ilara reflected on the human soldier who had begun this change. Kale's courage, his ability to see beyond fear and self-interest, had reminded her that leadership was not about power alone, it was about choice. And she had chosen restraint, wisdom, and understanding over impulsive conquest. Kale, for his part, monitored every development carefully. The war had not ended, but the dynamics had shifted dramatically. The human colonies were safer than they had been in decades, and Thaler's fleet, once poised for annihilation, now hesitated, giving hope a fragile but tangible form. He understood that the coming days would test both the humans and the Queen, that resistance would grow, and that danger was far from over. But he also knew that humans had survived far worse odds, and that one well-placed whisper could indeed ripple through empires. And so, the galaxy moved forward on a new trajectory. Battles continued, but their outcomes were no longer dictated solely by force. Strategy, empathy, and reason were beginning to shape the course of events, and humans had proven once again that courage and understanding could challenge even the greatest of powers. Queen Ilara's resolve remained firm. She had chosen to listen, to question, and to act with wisdom. The Council would not all agree, but change had begun, and in a universe defined by war, the first act of restraint was a victory in itself. Kale, observing from afar, allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. One human soldier had spoken a simple truth to a queen. That truth had begun to unravel assumptions, influence decisions, and create the possibility of a better future. It was a testament to humanity's enduring strength, the courage to act, the wisdom to understand, and the resilience to persevere when all seemed lost. And as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the fleet, both Kale and Ilara knew that the real battle was not only for survival. It was for the chance to prove that understanding, reason, and courage could change the fate of worlds. The galaxy held its breath. Across the vast stretches of space, fleets of Thaler and its allied species hovered in tense anticipation, poised on the edge of war. Yet for the first time in decades, the humans did not cower. Instead, they had hope, a fragile, flickering light in the darkness. And that hope rested on a single, improbable truth. One human soldier had reached a queen and changed the course of history with nothing but courage, intelligence, and empathy. Lieutenant Kale stood on the observation deck of the main human command vessel, eyes fixed on the Thalorian fleet. He had spent weeks coordinating defenses, monitoring the alien fleets, and sending coded messages to Queen Ilara, guiding her through the delicate dance of diplomacy and restraint. Every day had been a test of patience and strategy, every moment a potential turning point. Now it seemed the moment of reckoning had arrived. On Thaler, Queen Ilara convened the council in the grand chamber once more. Her golden eyes were steady, filled with the authority and clarity of a ruler who had seen both the cost of blind war and the power of reason. The chamber was alive with tension. Council members whispered to each other, some questioning the queen's restraint, others cautiously intrigued by the new path she was proposing. Counselors, she began, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade of light. For generations, we have measured strength by the fleets we command and the worlds we conquer. Today, I ask you to consider a different measure, the courage to choose wisely. Because strength without wisdom is meaningless. Consider this. If we attack blindly, we may destroy the humans, but we also destroy the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to create alliances that could benefit our people for centuries. Our legacy is not measured by conquest alone. It is measured by the choices we make and the lives we protect. Some counselors clicked and hissed in frustration, unwilling to accept her reasoning. Others leaned forward, intrigued, sensing the depth of her insight. She had challenged assumptions that had been unbroken for centuries, and the ripple effects were already being felt across the galaxy. Kale watched through the observation link as the council debated. He could feel the weight of every decision, every hesitation, every word spoken in the chamber. The Thalorian fleet had halted its aggressive maneuvers, leaving the human colonies in a state of cautious relief. This pause was fragile, and the smallest misstep could reignite the fires of war. But for the first time, humans were not entirely at the mercy of alien power. They had a chance to influence the outcome. Elara raised her hand, and the chamber fell silent. We will not attack without careful consideration. Instead, we will engage with humanity, she declared. We will establish a dialogue, assess their capabilities, and seek a path that preserves life while ensuring our security. We will act not out of fear, but out of strategy, foresight, and understanding. Her words carried not only wisdom but conviction, and even those who opposed her could not ignore the clarity of her vision. Kale exhaled, relief mixing with anticipation. The Queen had taken the first bold step toward peace, but the real work was just beginning. Human envoys would need to be dispatched, negotiations carefully crafted, and the Thalorian fleet kept in check to ensure no impulsive actions disrupted the fragile balance. In the following days, Elara sent a personal message to Kale. Your guidance has proven invaluable. Prepare your delegation. We will meet to discuss terms of cooperation. History may remember this as a turning point. A single misunderstanding could reignite centuries of hatred. The day of the meeting arrived. The delegation of humans, led by Kale, approached the grand palace of Thaler. The palace, vast and gleaming, had always been a symbol of Thalorian dominance. Today, however, it was the stage for something far greater, a demonstration of trust, dialogue, and the potential for interspecies cooperation. Kale stepped onto the palace floor, flanked by his team. Council members watched with suspicion, some openly hostile, others silently curious. Queen Elara awaited them, radiant and commanding, yet there was a warmth in her expression, a willingness to see the humans not as enemies, but as partners in shaping the future. You have come far, Lieutenant Kale, Elara said, her voice resonating through the chamber. And yet, it is not your fleet or your weapons that impress me. It is your courage, your insight, and your capacity to see beyond fear and hatred. That is what has given me pause, and that is what has allowed us to consider a different path. Your Majesty, it is not courage alone that guides humanity. It is understanding, cooperation, and the will to survive without needless destruction. We seek not to conquer Thaler, but to ensure that our peoples can coexist and perhaps thrive together. Others, swayed by the Queen's reasoning, began to see the value in diplomacy. The atmosphere in the chamber was charged, a mixture of tension, hope, and curiosity. Elara gestured to the star maps displaying human and Thalorian territories. We have the capability to destroy your colonies, she said, yet I have chosen restraint. Why? Because strength without wisdom is hollow, and victory without understanding is meaningless. We have seen what humans are capable of: resilience, ingenuity, courage. That is a strength we cannot ignore. Yet for the first time, there was a shared understanding, a recognition that cooperation could achieve more than conflict ever could. Over the next hours, negotiations began. Kale and the human delegation presented their proposals: limited technological exchanges, coordinated defense strategies, and plans for shared exploration of uncharted systems. Elara and her trusted advisors considered each point carefully, balancing the needs of their empire with the potential benefits of collaboration. Vorin, though still wary, observed the discussions quietly. Even he could see the value in restraint and thoughtful strategy. The humans' proposals were not mere pleas for mercy. They were practical, intelligent, and carefully considered. This was not weakness. It was an example of the kind of strength that could shape the galaxy's future. By the end of the session, a preliminary agreement was reached. Human colonies would remain protected, Thalorian fleets would monitor but not strike without mutual consultation, and joint research teams would be established to explore ways both species could benefit from shared knowledge. The council remained divided, but the Queen's authority and vision had prevailed. Kale felt a surge of pride. Humans had long been underestimated, dismissed as weak or primitive. Yet through courage, intelligence, and the willingness to speak truth, even when the odds were impossible, they had changed the course of an empire. One whisper had sparked a chain of events that now offered the possibility of peace, cooperation, and a new era for the galaxy. In private, Ilara spoke with Kale once more. "You have shown me that humans are capable of far more than I, or perhaps anyone, imagined. Your courage and wisdom have changed my perspective, and in doing so, have created a path toward a future where our species can coexist and prosper. You have reminded me that leadership is not only about power, but about choice. We endure because we adapt, we survive because we think, and we thrive because we care. That is what allows us to shape the future, even when faced with overwhelming odds. Let it be known that the human soldier who whispered in my ear has altered the destiny of our galaxy, not through violence, but through insight, courage, and truth. For centuries, humans had survived against empires far stronger than themselves, relying on ingenuity, courage, and adaptability. Now, for the first time, their resilience had been recognized by one of the galaxy's most powerful rulers. Even within the Thalorian Council, opinions began to shift. Some hardened members remained skeptical, unwilling to abandon their long-held beliefs. But others saw the wisdom in the Queen's actions, the value of cooperation, and the importance of measured restraint. Ilara had set a precedent. Strength guided by wisdom could achieve what brute force alone never could. Kale returned to the human command vessel, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. A single whisper, a single act of courage, had changed the course of events. Humans had always survived against impossible odds, and now they had shown that their true power lay not only in their fleets or their weapons, but in their ability to think, adapt, and act with moral courage. The galaxy, once dominated by fear, power, and conflict, had glimpsed a new possibility, a future shaped not by destruction, but by understanding. And it all began with one human soldier who dared to speak truth to a queen, trusting that courage and insight could ripple across stars. As Kale watched the stars streak by outside the observation deck, he felt a sense of quiet triumph. Not all battles were won with fire and blood. Some were won with words, with ideas, and with the bravery to act when the universe seemed determined to destroy you. Humans had survived before, and they would survive again, because they understood that true strength was more than power. It was the courage to act wisely, the insight to see beyond immediate gain, and the resilience to believe in hope even when it seemed impossible. The galaxy would never forget the human soldier who whispered in the Queen's ear. And the Queen herself would remember that the future was not predetermined by conquest, but by the choices of those willing to see further, think deeper, and act with courage and understanding. And in that moment, Lieutenant Kale knew that humanity had not only survived, but had changed the course of history for generations to come.